Okay, the reason why we look at different brain areas, they serve different functions, and I can go in detail. I'll probably go in detail in another video about the Brodmann areas. But it's just like I like using the analogy or the story. If you were an alien coming into Earth and you had a human in a formaldehyde jar or a bunch of jars, you could tell just from the structure, from the anatomy, that the hand is used for grasping, and that it's not weight bearing, and that the foot is weight bearing just from the anatomy. You don't need to even know, have ever seen a video or a picture, or ever seen a person in person, ever seen a human in person. You can still tell the foot it's weight bearing just from its anatomy. Well, the anatomy gives you a hint about its function. And so what Brodmann did over 100 years ago using a telescope, looking at the different parts of the brain, saw different structural changes. Like here, there's a lot of layers, like about 6 layers in the neocortex. Sometimes there's sublayers, and this like area 17 has layer 4 has 3 sublayers, and those 3 become one around this corner. And he goes, well, I'm going to call this area 17. And when the transition occurs in this anatomy, this must serve some other function. So I'm going to call it area 18. And we have found out it does serve different functions. Some people have not been as strict about that, and we do get this general division of the neocortex. We have what's called the primary areas, and that's when that connect to the thalamus directly, taking the sensory information. And then you have a secondary areas around the primary areas that do some processing of that modality. So if you're processing sound, this thing's specialized for sound, or vision for spatial information. And then eventually you get this heteromodal tissue, which can process multiple sounds together. It can put sound and vision. I said multiple senses together. I meant to say sound and vision. And up in the front, you get this organizing and goal direction and processing of all the senses. Underneath that is the limbic system, and other structures not shown. Okay, so we can get there from the EEG, from the surface EEG, using a lot of math, triangulating down. It's not excessive amount of math. It's reasonable, and you can see that. Look at this is actually a real signal, and you can see those sinusoidals, how beautiful they are. You can't get sinusoidals if you did your math wrong, and if it wasn't that there was meaningful sources down there, they wouldn't give you those sinusoidals. Okay, so we have found out through history, through empirical investigation, that often some suicidal tendencies, self-harming tendencies are associated with 5L. And 5L is this one over here. You can see it over in this part of the Brodmann map. The one thing, though, you always want to look at, now 5R actually usually is more we call the homicide marker. When people show problems in the 5R, they're often aggressive outwards. Think of the 5L as aggressive inwards. But they do these are called homologs, left and right areas of tissue of the hemispheres, and pretty much the same locations, and they govern each other. So we look at it at pairs. We also treat them as pairs when we do neurofeedback. We restore function by connecting the networks together. Typically, we don't isolate one of the homologs. We work the homologs together. So the 5L is usually the true marker. And this, unfortunately, is an individual who did commit suicide eventually. That's a map about 5-6 months before they did. Now, how do we fix it? We do what's called this opera conditioning, using what's called default network training, where a person is watching movies, and whenever they're giving the behaviors we want in the brain rhythms, then the movie is 100% quality. The screens are full and the volume is full. Whenever they deviate from those patterns that we want, the screen shrinks and the volume shrinks. And that way we're training the brain, rewarding it when it's in the state we want it to be. And the great thing about the level of physiology that we're training, physiology itself, it's very conducive to reward. It's very able to respond well and change its habits much easier than the volitional area. I call it the preconscious that we're training. We alter the preconscious, and it does take change very readily. I like to give the analogy that it's like when you learn a shortcut, like to the to drive to the airport. After you've been shown the shortcut, you never go the long way again. Well, same thing, when you give the habits that are most efficient to the brain, the preconscious stays in those habits, it gets rewarded by those habits because it's more efficient, not wasting energy, and it never goes back to the old ways, or rarely does, unless as long as not some crisis comes along. Okay, so here's an example. Here's an individual who has a lot of problems going on. They are still doing neurotherapy, but they were having issues. They're probably having aggression. They're very young, so they're not very suicidal, but this is a aggression marker over here. Again, aggression inwards, aggression outwards. And it's got normalized. They still got some other problems, but we're heading towards the green. We don't want orange. In this measure, we don't want orange. Blue is between orange, and then, orange is transparent. And then green is what we want to, and you can see it's heading that way. All right, here are individuals who are suicidal. This is the one who committed suicide. We've had a few actually, and like 2 who actually committed suicide. Of all the people I've recorded, the thousands I've recorded. This one is threatened suicide. This one's cutting herself. This one's very young. This is a different 6-year-old talking about suicide, which is a little unusual. Sometimes because I'm dealing with cases that have been adopted, abandoned by their parents, and so that's probably had the mom commit suicide. I think that one did. And there's area 5. You can see up in that spinning brain. That's the area it is. It's right next to your somatosensory, your body representation. And it's really what we like to say. It deals with how you get recruited by others. It's your personal boundaries. This is another individual committed suicide. In prison, you can see 5L wasn't as bad as 5R, but again, these are governing each other. Got all kinds of issues. Not so bad looking at this view, the overview, but had probably ADD, probably had rage problems. That's usually anger and rage on that side. Probably bipolar, might have been bipolar. Eventually, a lot of bipolars commit suicide. It's they say up to 1 in 2 attempted. It's between 1 and 2 or 1 and 3. The studies that should go all the way up to 1 and 2. This is about, we call this personal boundaries back here, and this is social boundaries. And when they yellow, they're invasive, typically. Invasive and recruitable, or again, that's the aggression on the right side, typically. Just to show you, not everyone who has the markers will manifest the suicidal behavior. So here's an example of a person very recruitable, but probably in a different way. Here they have much more. This could even be a PTSD marker, but it's probably fundamental about her personality. Area 9 is messed up as well, and so this is not a case of suicide, suicidal tendencies. Here, this one, not at all suicidal. This one's an outward one. There you can see it's really on the aggression on the 5Rs there, and there's a 6, invading people. This is actually a measure, can be a measure of psychotic risks. And here, in interior singlets is dealing with the consequences of your actions, and you can see not really having those. Okay. Just to compare the 2 of the people, they both were in prison. You can see this is the activity level, and we want to have an alpha peak. That's what we primarily want to have. And you can see how, especially the serial killer here, really did not develop in the singlets, and that very basic part of our brain that deals with governing the value of actions and nurturing ourselves. A lot of harmonics here, but also these were recorded when they were all in prison. So you would develop harmonics, meaning you have to, the harmonics is when you have to put agency outside of yourself when you're not in charge. Alpha is when, like, you can think it's when you're in charge. Well, you're gonna have to listen to people and respond to them a lot in prison. So when they were recorded, make decisions, you have to ascribe agency outward a lot. Okay. Now we do have, here's another individual who was suicidal and bipolar, and those go together very strongly. You can see depression leads to suicide. In unipolar, 16%, bipolar, it's up to 30%. Like I said, I saw even recently a paper of 50% will eventually attempt suicide in their lifetime. Now, the interesting thing about area 5, it has these white matter tracks, along with area 7, but 5 even stronger, going down to the activating area, what's called the ARAS. And I have a nice little paper. We've known about the ARAS since like 1948. Marucci and Magoon did this great paper that shows you simulate this little area here. ARAS is the ascending reticular activating system. It's in the upper brain stem. If you stimulate it, you can get them. Once you stimulate it, they wake up. The cat will wake up. Doing cat research. You can stimulate the thalamus. Doesn't make a difference. They stay asleep. Doesn't have any influence at all. So the idea is that this is the activating system. I don't know if you can put them to sleep, if that's what they're saying here, but by stimulating the thalamus. But you stimulate. This is where we wait. This is the thing that activates us, wakes us up in the morning. And area 5 goes right down there, which is one reason why it's sort of hard. This is area 5 is probably the hardest to improve in neurofeedback, but we do so, as I've already shown you. And again, this person was bipolar. We often see a bipolar marker is 9L is usually messed up. 9L is this one over here, and this is the connectivity measure of it, and that's often associated with someone having these cycles of expansiveness and contracting, being expansive in their thinking, and then eventually feeling everything's horrendous and contracting, getting suicidal. And I've shown this in previous video, but you can see even this is the blood flow. You can see how they get contracting, no energy, very little energy, then massive amount, get expansive, and they contract again. And you can see in bipolar is very highly associated with arts, and this is human, and this is composition. You can see him getting to these what they call hypomanic stages, getting very expansive, but then the world doesn't change or whatever happens, it isn't enough to maintain it. It collapses, it's another expanse, and then another collapse. And in essence, attempts suicide, as most bipolars do, and succeeds at some level of suicide at the end of life. This was a study which was done when I was actually at the writers' workshop, and just showing that the writers' creativity is highly associated with mood disorders, especially bipolar. And you can see there's actually two of the writers who were being studied actually committed suicide when they were during the time that they were being studied in the late 80s. And just the final list of how bipolar goes along with artists, be it writers, comedians, actors, musicians. You can see a list of all the people who say they've been bipolar. Some of them may have been more unipolar. And all the ones over here have committed suicide. Marilyn Monroe is obviously still a mystery. And there may be some other factors why they committed suicide, but all of them on this side. It's a very common response, unfortunately. And the good thing is we can actually fix area 9 as well as we can fix the area 5. We can solve these issues. All right. And that's our website, kaiserneuromap.com.